Greetings. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about, but this is going to be somewhat of my auditory journal, and I've started to write things down because I've realized that I have so many thoughts that are in my head and none of them are congruent, and so I need to write them down in order to form some sort of harmony. And I think I'm going to do that as well with video as well, because it's good to, train my Wernicke area in my brain, you know what I mean? Probably a good thing. I also am recovering from bronchitis, and so that has been fairly difficult, but as I've continued to grow, I've realized that trivial matters are the most important because they always can be unified with a deeper level of meaning. And I don't want to word vomit at all, so I'm going to try to keep things clear and concise, because I think I like to sound smart. It's like, Jacob, who have you been talking to? It's like, well, I want to sound smart to myself, and I have to check myself on that, because I get a lot of my thinking inspiration from Nietzsche, because I'm currently reading his book Beyond Good and Evil, and I want to study him more. I find him very fascinating. By the end of it, I'll probably differ from his beliefs. I hope to, because if I've stayed the same as him, then I've contributed to absolutely nothing in what would be classified as the development of philosophy. So I hope that I can come to some sort of agreement with him and expand as well as hit him where it hurts. But I think, in the sense of him, that I don't really care about what this generation thinks of me, especially when it comes to my thinking. I want my thinking to affect the future generations, and I want to be right. And so in order to do that, I can't be held back by, constraints that are societally built up in a generational manner. And I think the problem with philosophy nowadays is that it's not adapting to the technological advancement. And I hope that I can look at things from a place that is not biased. And I know that in and of itself is kind of paradoxical, because you can't really look at anything outside of your own bias. But I want my bias to be right. And that's not stemming from a place of ego. It's stemming from a place of wanting knowledge to be beneficial in an altruistic manner. Now, what altruism means to me is stemming from a sense of self. Because you can't leave yourself. Everything comes from within. It doesn't have to be egocentric. Because there's selfishness, and then there's a sense of self. And selfishness is bad, but a sense of self is very, very good. And it is the way in which we orient ourselves, whether that's the story we tell ourselves, the personality we want to portray. It's many things. The persona, I guess. But I think the main difference between my bias and other people's biases is that they want the truth. It's like, Jacob, you don't want the truth? Not necessarily. It's not really my goal. I guess I have a very platonic view of what truth is, and I think it's a very good one. Because truth to me isn't the forbidden knowledge that is offered by, different cults and secret societies. Why does that matter? I don't want your knowledge. Knowledge in of itself is completely meaningless, in my opinion. It's the meaning behind the knowledge that gives it some form of richness. And to me, it's far better than being in the 1% of people who know the truth. It's far worse, that is far worse, than having a one-on-one relationship with the pursuit of the transcendent understanding of the ultimate good. And if you listen to my videos, you'll probably be hearing that a lot. The one-on-one relationship with the pursuit of the transcendent understanding of the ultimate good. I don't think we know enough to get rid of the metaphysical completely. One thing I've learned is that in the developmental stages, consider everything. Because if you don't, then you're just led by a bias that you don't even realize. Because if you are aware of your bias and what you lean towards, then it's very plausible for you to kind of put your iron will on that and then move in the opposite direction. You can train yourself very well in this manner. If I tend to lean towards a specific viewpoint, the first thing I will do is to completely go 180 and just go in the opposite direction. Because once I'm able to do that, then I have nothing left for me to worry about when it comes to my beliefs. And that's what it is. They're my beliefs. It's still not the completely fundamental truth that orients all points in what we would call fundamental reality. So it's still belief, and that should be okay. Like, that's okay for it to just be belief, but that's all it is. Because it's the reason why it's okay to have beliefs, because we have it in mathematics, right? We use it because it works. It makes sense. If we didn't have, and if we got rid of the proofs that are axiomatic in nature and in principle, then we would not be able to perform math anywhere close to the efficiency that we do now. So it's vital to have some axiomatic systems of belief. I mean, it's completely imbued within our physiological system of function, axiomatic belief systems. We're not made. I mean, this is obvious, right? This is something that if you have kind of done some research, or not even research, just watch a couple YouTube videos, you realize that we're not made for truth. We're not built for knowledge. We're built for meaning and belief. And, it makes sense because the neurotransmitters in our brain, like dopamine, orient ourselves in a way that what we hyperfixate on, we always want more of. And if it's possible to get more of that something, then we will continue kind of the addictive behavior behind that pursuit. So, in order to sustain that, we have to have some level of belief, and then understanding, of course, but that understanding can always change. It has to be flexible. But the belief system behind the intrinsic need for more always needs to be the same. And then as we pursue that, we have to, allow the here and now chemicals like serotonin to allow us to be okay with the other things in life. Because here's the thing. You can't be too dopaminergically stimulated in every single area of your life. Otherwise, it's not going to be fundamentally functional in any way, shape, or form. You have to use 100% of all you can in your brain and in your psyche. And I think that's very psychologically accurate, because if you focus too much in one area, you'll be completely lacking in others. And it's kind of the neuroplastic principle of use it or lose it. And if you don't use these, very intrinsic systems of functions in your neurological processes, then you won't be able to sustain a balanced lifestyle. And that'll cause many imbalances in the equilibrium of your function. So it's very important to find balance in everything. And everything is a very abstract term. It's like, what the hell is everything? Everything that you know of. And oftentimes, everything we know, we don't consider. That's why I put so much emphasis on considering everything and having that one-on-one relationship with that pursuit of understanding what is good and meaningful. And that is where we can kind of form our dopaminergic need for more, to be oriented in. That's how it works. That's how it should work. But we use it for things as trivial as knowledge. And it's good, but it has to be oriented and congruent in a way that is sustainable for how we biologically work. So you can't cut the process short. That's why you have to consider everything, and then the functions behind how you use it properly. Like, there is a proper way to function, and it's different for each and every one of us. Like, no brain is the same. That's very fundamental. No person is ever going to be the same. Like, it's possible to get close, but even then, our mental experience, as well as our, biological genomes, will pretty much make it very likely that will never happen again. That you are your own person, and that I don't think there's ever been, like, it's possible, but such small margin. Like, it's insanely small. I don't remember the numbers, but it's hundreds of zeros, the likelihood of there being another person exactly like you. And I know that it seems to be that the more improbable something is, the more likely it is to happen in a reverse entropic scenario. It's very funny. It's like, the more unlikely something is to happen, it seems there is a tendency for it to be oriented in the most unlikely way possible. And it's hard to say the likelihood of anything outside of, kind of the innate substrate of, fundamental energy, what that would look like. So I'm not really sure. But what the silver lining is when it comes to the probability of how something could happen. But it does seem the more unlikely it is to happen, the more it comes into existence. And that, I think, is where we could probably kind of tune in a little bit and maybe come to a conclusion on, what mental phenomena is. Because obviously the way we have looked at it has warranted absolutely no results. I've decided to study neuroscience and psychology because I think it's obviously fundamental to human experience, and as well as understanding, what we are. And it's been quite the journey, those two are hard subjects. But man, once you've got even a grasp on 1% of the fundamental understandings of what those mean, then it's beautiful, especially if you have that one-on-one relationship with just understanding the transcendent desire for good. It's very nice. And what those instincts that are imbued in us entail, it's hard to know what that is. That's for sure. It's like, what the hell is that? I'm still looking into what instincts really are. It's very complicated. Obviously, it's like, oh, well, evolution. It's like, but what is that? oh my God, it's incredible. It's truly incredible how much experience is viewed into our physiology and biology. It's truly beautiful. And I guess that what I've come to realize is that since we orient ourselves towards goals, and the goal, so we orient ourselves in a sense towards a goal that is greater than what we have now. And it seems to be that is what we conceptualize as God. That is what God is. Now, that might be a little sacrilegious. I find that to be the most basic understanding of what it could be to conceptualize a deity that actually exists. That he is the process of orientation towards an infinite more. That makes sense to me. I don't know what that means, but I find that kind of the Platonic view of the ultimate good to be very synonymous with that viewpoint as well. And I'm doing a class on Platonism. I find it very fascinating, and it's definitely created a bias in my opinion, but I've considered it, and I've also looked at a lot of the critics of Platonism, and I can very much evidently see their biases as well as where the Platonic biases lie. It's very evident to me. I understand it. So I don't feel bad kind of borrowing from Platonistic viewpoints, because I also borrow from non-Platonistic viewpoints. So I understand my bias completely, don't get me wrong. It's just, I find it to be the most meaningful understanding of how we should orient ourselves in light of our physiology and the instincts that have guided us for God knows how long. For 6,000 years. Just kidding. It is quite the interesting viewpoint that God just created things how they should be. And so we've come to rationalize that from a standpoint of, the incredible amount of length that is shown in, kind of naturalistic science. And they refute it being like, oh, well, that's just how God made it to look like that, because that's the only way to do it. Well, the problem is you're taking, your biblical literature a little too seriously. There's, which is also known that the Bible is a library. And, I have to definitely look into a lot of more Eastern cultures and understand their viewpoints, because I find it very, very fascinating. And I don't see a lot of, from what I've looked at, it doesn't seem like a lot of Eastern cultures and how they kind of pinpoint enlightenment as the key, and kind of, flowing as opposed to knowing. I find that to be very, very good. It's not bad at all, because it places emphasis on the intrinsic structure of how we will orient ourselves in light of enlightenment. And I think that's very profound and very likely that is how it works. And I do find that evident to be in also the Judaic and Christian literature as well. That seems to be very evident. Now, obviously, the steps to get towards there are different, but I think I want to do a lot of research into understanding the click, the switch that allows for that internal transformation to happen. And I know it's, an internal transformation, so it's a personal want, and I don't know if there's any like unifying typical structures that would underlie the substrate of the meaningful experience and how you would access that. I don't know how that actually works in the slightest, and I don't know if it's the same or different for anyone else, or if it is just a persona. But then we haven't even, begun to discuss the problem of mental phenomena if that's the case. So, and what that looks like for the individual. And if there are any unifying factors of mental phenomena, then we can say the same for our sense of congruent self. Because there's no unified self that is intuitively harmonious. There's a congruence of multifaceted social and internal and biological factors that are at play. So I won't say there's no soul, because I don't know. I tend to be very sympathetic towards the metaphysical view of the world in light of how little we know. Honestly, because it makes more sense to live in a rational world, because it's easier, I tend to just run away in the opposite direction. And that's not, the person I look up to the most is honestly Christopher Hitchens. Like, the absolute beast of, atheism. And, like Sam Harris. I absolutely love Sam Harris as well. Obviously their viewpoints are a little different. But, there isn't actually a lot of... They don't believe in a lot of the same things. A lot of the ones who brought about the new atheistic movement don't actually believe the same things. It's very fascinating how, people who are against them just kind of lump them in one kind of group, and you realize that, that's not going to work, because there's going to be people who then decide to listen to them and be like, hey, all of these guys have their own same creative ideas that maybe don't have answers, but they don't have answers in the same sense that nobody does. But they do bring a very good aspect of how the arguments for how the nature of existence scientifically works, and as well as philosophically it works as well. And, obviously, you should have your problems with everybody, because no one's got it 100% right. If you find yourself 100% believing in somebody, oh man, you should fact check not them, you should fact check yourself. Because seriously, if you've done that, you've failed to consider everything. You have to consider everything. That's the most important thing you could ever possibly do. And maybe it's possible for one person to be 100% right. But what the hell does that even mean? To be 100% right about what? It doesn't possibly make sense. And it couldn't possibly make sense. I mean, you have to be aware of your own ignorance in order for you to grow. I mean, it's a very Socratic way of viewing things, but I think it's right. I think it's very right. And it kind of keeps your ego in check, in the sense that it challenges your fundamental values. Take a shot every time I say fundamental. But, what is philosophy? It's getting to the underlying fundamental nature of reality. That's literally the definition that I have in my Philosophy 101 notebook. I took notes on. That is what philosophy is. It's identifying the underlying substrate of fundamental reality. Take another shot. Now, I will say, the proclivity to drink as you gain more knowledge is very fascinating. And kind of feel like it's like when you drink, everything kind of just feels okay. It's pretty funny. But I don't drink very often. I have like 1 or 2 drinks every couple weeks. Also because I have to study so much that it's just, I know the disbenefits of alcohol, so I'm not going to go down that route. And I know it won't like impair me too much, you know? Like I could probably still live a pretty good life drinking alcohol. But I want to see where complete soberness brings me. Not complete, like I said, I'll have a drink or two. But you know, you're still pretty sobered after like 1 or 2 drinks. I'm a lightweight. So I guess in that sense I am a very good, kind of clean internal functions. And so it's very easy for me to get drunk because my brain, like everything just completely focuses on getting rid of those toxins, which is fine, but which is good actually, because then, you know, it kind of gives me that wooziness, and after 1 or 2 drinks I don't have to completely just drown myself in alcohol to feel anything. So it's very nice, especially because I'm really just trying to unlock creative aspects within my mind through the use of, you know, impairment, which works pretty well. I could say something, but I'm not going to. Don't want to get canceled. Oh God, cancel culture. What the hell even is that? I mean, man, I understand where they're coming from. You know, like I've considered I've considered the viewpoints of cancel culture for what they are. And to me, it just seems just okay. Like it's an okay viewpoint, but it's not good in the sense that it'll bring about anything new and exciting and innovative. It's weird because it's fundamentally conservative, like cancel culture is, right? And for it to be coming from a liberal viewpoint is just absolutely mind-boggling to me. Absolutely mind-boggling. So I would say that's where I am on cancel culture. It's just downright confusing. And so that's why, you know, I kind of looks like, okay, well, who's controlling this kind of party? And like, oh, it's these guys. What are these guys also doing? Oh, they're also controlling the other party as well. So we're just kind of marionette puppets in a sense, you know. It doesn't really matter what side of ideology you're on. The fact is you have put your faith in an ideology. And that in and of itself is not good at all. Hold on. I'm going to make sure this is still recording. Indeed it is. You know, one thing I definitely want to get into is physics a little more. Because, you know, I'm pursuing neuroscience and psychology. And neuroscience actually has a pretty good amount of, like, you know, understanding, you know, the principles of lots of, what's the best way to put it? I mean, obviously, like, you know, like different properties of electricity, obviously, but that's pretty basic. Ohm's law. Yep. You know, one thing is very nice is that I took a course on the electrical properties of the neuron, and it was a Harvard course on Harvard X for free. No, it was like EDU. It's called like EDUX or something, or edx.com, and they had just a bunch of free Harvard courses and like courses from Cambridge as well and Oxford. It's like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely wonderful, because I don't have a lot of money, and so this is perfect for me to be able to just, you know, do Harvard classes online. You know, I mean, you don't get any sort of like credit or certification unless you like pay for it. So it's, if you're looking for credentials, then it's not for you. But if you're just looking to think and learn, oh man, it's absolutely beautiful. Especially if it's like a class that you like want to take and not have to take. Because one thing I had trouble with in school was that I didn't want to take a lot of these classes. And I think now it'd be different because I could, you know, find it intrinsically interesting if I really tried. I think that's a good thing to be able to do, to do that. But you have to be careful because you got to stay on track, right? You can't be too disoriented in a world of chaos. You have to have some structure. So you can't be too interested in everything, but just enough interest to get by your classes. I'm using my computer as a light because I think that I would bit better lighting. You look better with better lighting. Wow. Can't you tell that I think a lot? But I will say me processing words out loud is something that I am so bad at. It's so hard for me to convey the feelings and things that I'm thinking talking, because I don't think in words. Like, I don't think in words at all. I think in experiences. And obviously I can think words if I want to, but it's a very conscious experience. It's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. I think in experience, like in mainly semantic experiences. And then, I abstract those semantic experiences beyond into my, kind of imagination, and then I create a world that I find to be true in a subjective sense, in which I can understand how to survive. And my definition of survival is understanding things. And that is how I want to survive. And I don't think that we're built at all for truth. But I want to understand the best possible way in which to orient yourself in my own subjective experience. In order to do that, that's how I think I'm going to do it. Potentially. So, we'll see how that goes. One thing I've been really, really fascinated on is self-consciousness, because in my mind I view it as a spirit. There's like a spirit of self-consciousness. I don't mean spirit as in like a ghost. I mean of like a almost, it's like a creation of different brain oscillations, brain waves that combine to create a sense of self-oriented reflection that creates a feedback loop, that creates a negative outlook on future events, that identify your own beliefs to not be fundamental. And so you don't know how to orient yourself in light of that feedback loop that is in usually a social manner. And I'm so glad I got that on video, because I haven't exactly put that into words yet. So now I can kind of look back and kind of look into it and abstract it a little more. I wrote this thing. Here's my master equation for my unified time substrate theory that I'm working on. It's fascinating, to say the least. I've never had such a shroom-like experience while sober. It was insane, absolutely insane. Here's me trying to figure out quantum mechanics. I don't understand it at all, which is good because nobody understands it, and so I can feel better about myself. Oh God, where is this? I think I opened the wrong notebook, perhaps? Hold on, guys. This is important, and I want to show you, very much so. Not that. Here it is. There seems to be, I don't know if you guys can see that, but to me there seems to be kind of this, like, this is you. This is kind of your, the psychological model of what you think you are. And then there's kind of this underlying oscillation of the spirit of self-consciousness. And then there's this like unsafe button. And you can switch it on manually, but it oftentimes isn't manual, but you can make it manual. You can stop being self-conscious. It's completely possible. And then from there, it seems to be, the off switch has to do, and this is the same for on as well, but there's anxiety, obviously. There's a hippocampal function, and then it goes to the insula. That doesn't really matter. Doesn't really make sense. But I'm just kind of working on it. It's a small thing. I wrote this in like 5 minutes. but I do find it fascinating. I want to really dive deep into understanding what self-consciousness is, because I did some research and it's actually, we don't know a whole lot. And I had such a big revelation while I was sitting here. I just kind of wrote that down. And I was like, this is very fascinating to me, because it's weird, because what we don't understand, we feel. Like, we experience the things that we don't understand scientifically. And so I was just having this moment where I could completely feel the on and off switch of this kind of spirit of self-consciousness that kind of can corrode your mind and create a negative feedback loop. And it was so fascinating, like just turning that off and on, and then like messing with it and just focusing on that. And I think because of that, I'm going to have a really nice intuitive approach to understanding how to confront this issue. And I want to do that well and empirically and with studies and all that fun stuff. But we'll see how that goes. I'm only 19. I've got so much time. Like, I'm definitely going to go to higher education and get my doctorate. Like, that is 100% what I do. I have so many different ideas for, like, my own, like, doctorate thesis. Like, and my master's thesis as well. I have so many ideas that I want to really dive into it. I could dive into them for years, man. For years. Absolutely, I could. It would just be incredible, absolutely incredible to do so. Now, I wonder if I should put this also in podcast form. That would be fascinating, because I'm definitely going to put this on YouTube just for fun, because all I watch are videos that are on the subject of, chest is showing, don't want to show that. All the videos that I posted have been like backflip and vlog tutorials from when I was like 14. And I'm going to leave those up. I find them hilarious, I really wanted to be an influencer really bad. And I played its game, man. I played the influencer game. And I think if I kept going, I could have gotten moderately successful. But then I just kind of didn't care to. I kind of frowned at myself and others. And I kind of knew what it meant to completely idolize that kind of lifestyle. And then I kind of just got rid of it because I didn't like it. And then I, kind of fell into despair, and I didn't really do anything for a while. And then I kind of woke up, after my girlfriend broke up with me. And I was like, oh, wait, what is truth? I should look into what that is. And then I had this whole little transformation, and it was pretty wonderful, actually. So, it's like, I appreciate my ex-girlfriend so much because of how much it hurt. It's like, in a normal situation, if I didn't grow from that, I'd feel much resentment and bitterness. And whether that's her fault or mine isn't really relevant in this case, but there would be that kind of spirit of, like, bitterness that, I think resides in most people after breakups, because they don't do anything better with their life after the fact that their life has gotten worse. They just continue down a spiral of just absolute, depravity of anything meaningful. And, the problem was, in the first place, was that you were putting intrinsic meaning, you were projecting that onto something else that wasn't internal. You had complete reliance on an external force, and that was your problem, my friend. Not the fact that she did all these things, or that she wasn't, your ideal woman. It was the fact that you were still projecting meaning onto an external source. And the thing is, that external source wasn't the intrinsic value of that individual. It was the fantasy that you wanted them to fill out for your enjoyment. That was where you made the mistake. And so that's kind of where it went off in your case. That's kind of what happened. And, I can say this because it happened to me. And it's happened to a lot of my friends. And, it's hard to say that's what happens across the board. But like I said, consider everything. Consider everything, man. I promise. It's what you should do. It's exactly what you should do, man. Consider everything you possibly can. And I promise you things will end up working out. Like, I wouldn't say I've considered a nihilistic viewpoint, because I've been there before. And then I've gotten out of it, because I realized that, this is what happens when you sustain your meaning with knowledge. And I found out there wasn't a compatibility between the two. Knowledge can be meaningful, but that is the end of it, because there's meaning and knowledge is a secondary force. We weren't made for knowledge to have meaning, but meaning to be knowledgeable and to be coherent and reasonable. And oftentimes that reason transcends our understanding and resides in a cultural unification of those ideals. And then you can leave it to the experts to put that on paper, of course. And I think that is a very necessary skill for the development of humanity. But it's not needed for sustainability of the individual. That's not. Like, everything has a reason for something. And oftentimes there is truth in that. While there's probably absurdity in it as well. But there's absurdity in practically everything. So you have to be careful about, placing absurdity on something, therefore it is wrong. That seems to be a very ignorant thing to do. This whole existence is absolutely absurd. Why do you think so many people just don't have the will to live anymore? They absolutely don't have the will to live anymore. And I completely understand it. Like, it makes 100% sense if you haven't considered everything. Now, that everything is going to be different for every individual. And so I'm gonna try to talk in a more abstract sense of what that is. Because otherwise it'll just be my bias leaking into you. But I want to give you a new perspective to look into the things that you find innate and intrinsic and exciting. That is my goal here. Not for you to understand my beliefs, but to understand the reasons behind why I orient myself like I do. That seems to be far more meaningful and impactful. And oftentimes I think I have the will to create these types of videos and put them out into something as incredible as the internet, because there is an algorithm that will lead me to people who think like me. And I want to find people who think like me. And I think oftentimes this type of video is almost a cry for help, in a way. Help me escape my loneliness. And I don't mind being lonely. I have friends that I cherish very deeply, and they cherish me. But I also want to find more people who think like me. I think the easiest way to do that is obviously online, especially in a world where everything is expensive. The only thing you can find community in is online. Seriously, everyone, especially, the problem is that, at least in my society, I live in the middle, almost in the middle of nowhere. I'm a 30-minute drive from like a huge bustling city of activity. It's not like I'm like in the middle of nowhere to where I don't have anyone. Like, there's pretty decent. I live in Texas, and I live in a pretty rural area, but there's also, I live fairly close to everything, but there's no community to build off of from there and from where I am. Not on a level that's sustainable in a communal sense. So it's very frustrating. And I think a lot of people, they wrestle with this by looking for community online that can be as accessible as going to your neighbor's house. Turn on your computer and message your friend, you know? And that seems to be better, 100%. I think I'll do that as well, find people online to talk with and to think about things with. I think that's intrinsically wonderful. And then, but my goal is to then, start an actual community and maybe start a lab with people who think like me. Start a group of people who want to go on tours and, debate people and all of these wonderful things that could be so great. But, people pursue a lot of different things, and so I have to really be careful about, putting my own fantastical viewpoints on people as well. I guess I want to stand beside people who embody the notion of pursuing a greater good. And it's not defined what that good is, obviously. I think that good, whatever you conceptualize it as, is an infinite pursuit in its fullest extent. There's no end to what more there could be. There isn't, at least to my knowledge, to my understanding at least. And what I believe in is that there's an infinite progression in all things that could be considered a Platonistic view of the ultimate good. And I think that's where Plato went wrong. Is that it seemed like at the end of his literatures, all of it was for somebody else to find that ultimate good, not realizing it's an infinite progression in its intrinsic sense. And I think that's where Plato really went wrong. But if he would have realized that, I think he might have had a much more enlightening experience. But not to say it wasn't like he wasn't a genius thinker or anything. He'd probably, if I had this conversation with him, I'd point that out and then he'd probably destroy me, so who knows. But then again, I found that winning an argument does not mean you're right in any way, shape, or form. Which is why the best, thinkers don't argue. They just rationalize things and ask questions. The most intelligent people, they get passionate. Don't mistake passion for anger. That's one thing that a lot of mediocre thinkers do, is that someone gets passionate and they're like, whoa, okay, and then they'll get angry at their passion. It's like, no. There's reason with them. And then they go back to being reasonable, because you've reached a point of such importance to what they hold to be axiomatically valuable. So of course they're going to get passionate. And you can't mistake that for being irrational. And if you start being irrational, you're only going to further implement their ideas to be true, because they're being rationally passionate, and that is met with irrational anger. You're only solidifying the rationale of their viewpoints without furthering their shift in a view that could be even better. And I think that's one of my critiques for psychology of philosophical debate, definitely. But what do I know? Well, here's the thing, you don't know anything, but you can believe in stuff, and it's very good to believe in things, but not to a level in which you should orient yourself. To believe in knowledge is for it to think that it holds intrinsic value in how everyone should orient themselves, or at least how you should orient yourself. And I think that's where philosophy is very good, because it, kind of like Nietzsche kind of went into this, to where it is a direct expression of bias. That is what that is. And so that's pretty profound in its own sense. But anyways, I think I'm going to end it here. If you made it this far, quite impressive, because it took me a while to kind of get in a groove. So, hope you enjoyed my word vomit It was quite fun. Definitely going to do this more often. It's good to get your, words out. It's good to think. Be imaginative. A lot of the things that I said now I've never spoken about out loud in the manner in which I did. So it's very good. You should always have a platform. Even if you don't put it anywhere, I'm just putting it out there for fun and in hopes that other people will see it and then talk to me. So we'll see where it all goes. Talk to you guys later.